Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. I am here with my friend and trusty producer, Max Kerman. Max, what's up?
I'm doing okay.
We're also here with our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Shane.
Hello.
We're also here with one of our favorite and returning guests now, Ann T. Donahue.
Hiya.
She's more of the real pop culture aficionado.
Oh,
than
that's
Shane
not.
is.
I'm not going to challenge you, Shane.
No,
you
you've
have
already
tattoos. You are more hardcore than me automatically.
You
by
are,
default.
though. It's the biggest joke is that I'm the pop culture aficionado.
Oh, okay.
I rarely touch on pop culture.
I only saw 2 movies in theaters so far this year, though, so I really shouldn't talk.
Okay.
And one was Dunkirk twice.
One was Dunkirk.
What was the other one?
Baby Driver.
Oh, nice.
It was good.
Yeah. We interviewed Edgar Wright. Oh, you said...
We talked about this.
You mentioned he follows you on Twitter.
Well, not to name drop, but he definitely does.
Oh, you name drop. Okay, guys, we're going to get into a lot of stuff, but actually before we get into it, I just wanted to, maybe bring up some really sad news that happened. We are recording this on a Wednesday, and last night, Canadian legend and icon Gord Downie passed away.
Yeah, I found out this morning. We all found out this morning. So it was kind of strange, to be honest, because we're in a Canadian rock band. People want to call to get comment. And I just find that it's a tough job for a reporter to have to call people who are sort of somewhat connected. And I'm not too closely connected with Gord Downie's family or anything, but to have to, the morning of, talk about it, or because I've done 3 interviews already, and it just feels a little, on a certain level, a little gross. On another level, it feels kind of nice to be able to talk about him. But it's, these mornings are just strange and tough. So,
how did you find out, Ann?
The internet. It was... Like, I don't know. I'm bad. Like, I was telling this to Max on the way, and I'm really bad with death. Like, when we were talking about this too, where it's like, it's almost sadder when you find out someone's sick because you're like, like you got, like, now you wait. It's like a waiting game. Then every time his name trended for like the last year, it was like,
yeah.
Interesting.
And then it happens. And I think like if anyone's ever had a family member die of like a prolonged illness, it's like this weird, I don't want to say relief, but it is. It's this weird, and then that's weird. Death is really strange. It brings out weird traits in people too, and I think like when people come to you for comment stuff too, that's like it's strange, right? Because you can't. How do you react in a way that like death is? I'm so bad at it. I always say that I'm very bad at it.
Yeah, well, because my first instinct is like, get this camera out of my face. Like that. That's my. Not that there's a camera in my face, but like I don't want to talk to you about this. This sucks. But then you go, okay, well maybe I should say something. And then when you start thinking about it and what Gord Downie meant to you or meant to me, I go, oh, actually, maybe I do want to talk about it a little bit. I don't know. It's a lot of emotions.
Well, I think ultimately it's like the non-cynical way to look at it is when someone famous dies, a lot of people post on their social medias and whatnot, so Facebook, all this stuff and what it means to them. But what they're getting out of it is what people get out of a funeral or a wake is you get to all sort of have this shared experience where you all sort of talk about what that meant to you and how it informs sort of your experiences and then your relationships to one another. So when you do go on the radio and talk about it, for instance, there's a bunch of people out there listening that are sort of like dealing with it through listening to people talk about it.
Totally. And actually, I got some comments from the Q interview I did. And people said, oh, he said it really well. Or like that, I identify with what Max just said on the radio. I was like, okay, that actually makes me feel kind of nice because then you have this moment of human connection.
Yeah.
I got 2 funerals tonight.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I feel like last year and this year have been very death heavy, like around me. I feel like I've known more. Like it's been very strange. Last year, my uncle died. It was sorry, I know you have to beep that out. It was this whole thing. And then, but the week before my friend's dad died, the next day I got a text from a friend being like, and my grandma died. The next day I got a text from a friend being like, a family friend died. And the next I was at my visit, like the visitation thing for my family. And it was like, my friend's boyfriend took a lot of drugs and killed himself. And it was like, and then this year's just been like.
Well, every morning it feels like a morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's so many famous people now in the world that every day someone who is connected to us in some way dies.
Yep.
Yeah, and also not to make this about politics,
it's
it's just like the guy running the show is such a moron, and it just feels like the death of America every single day. Like it's like you don't feel like you're being comforted, or like the people who should be offering support and showing strength have any real strength themselves. At least I felt, even if shit was hitting the fan, and at least we got Obama in charge. Like, I think about Obama when I'm going through turbulence when I'm flying.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Is that your like comfort person?
Yeah, him and a few other people.
Do you like get nervous on planes?
Yeah, I hate turbulence.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting off subject.
Let's talk about death, guys. Let's just make this the podcast.
More about that. Well, I guess just to wrap it up, really sad to see Gord go, and you're going to hear a lot of things over the next couple of days by the time you hear this. And rest
in peace.
He was one of the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on from that, there's a lot going on in the news. Obviously, Max, you just brought up, leadership in the States. We want to talk about politics just now. We'll also talk about something that's been really prominent, and that is obviously what started a floodgate, which was the Harvey Weinstein allegations, and a lot of people going on the record for, crimes that he had committed and harassment that he had inflicted on people. And I guess one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, Anne, is because a lot of times it's just us three dudes like sitting around talking about it, and we don't really have necessarily a female perspective. So it's nice to have one.
So you can also, I'm going to give a PSA on this podcast. You can say women, don't say females, because it's like a thing. Because men on the right side will say females, and it's almost like a combative feeling now.
Oh,
so just say women.
Women. Okay, good to know.
Or just like, now I know that I'm just like a little fun PSA for the pod.
No, we're here.
And how conscious of it should we be? Like, I call myself Shaney Boy.
That's fine.
But calling a girl, like a woman a girl, how bad is that?
I mean, who is the woman that you're calling a girl? Like, is it a stranger?
Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I bumped into this girl today.
Oh, I mean, like, I personally wouldn't be like, how dare you? I think, like, you have to be conscious when you're introducing someone or talking about a person, because sometimes they also might not identify with a gender. So they is a very conscious thing. I find that I get asked my pronoun a lot more in interviews now, just because people are being careful. They're like, are you identify as she? I'm like, yes, very boring, cis, hetero, female. Sorry that I don't have anything else to add to that. But
cool.
Yeah, you can say girl. Like, I mean, if you're not talking about, like, I don't know, if you're not like Hillary Clinton walks by, this girl walked by, I'd be like, well, that's Hillary Clinton. Like,
yeah.
We're all having a fun gender chat today, guys.
We're here to learn.
Yeah.
I love it. That's why I like coming here. If I was weirded out, I wouldn't come.
Well, one of the things that happened sort of shortly after the Harvey allegations came out was that you went on Twitter and you asked people to share their Harvey Weinstein experiences.
That's true.
And
I need to do that.
Much like an avalanche, and we discussed this actually in our last pod.
I listened like the stalker I am.
You had this sort of overwhelming outpouring of experiences. So I guess my question would be like, what led you to sort of do that? What was the light bulb that went off for like, I want to know more? And then what did it feel like to have that kind of outpouring?
I mean, okay, so the thing about when I tweet, usually I don't think when I say, like, if you go through my feed, you'll be, she talks about wearing a sweatsuit a lot, and now she's also like complaining about this, but she's like really psyched to see Harry Styles in Dunkirk. So it was one of those things where, like, I was reading that Harvey Weinstein op-ed. It sounded so familiar because, I mean, and I remember, like, last time I was on here, I told you guys about that priest. So, like, obviously, like, by 17, I was very used to being sexually harassed and groped and whatever. But it was that abuse of power that I found was the parallel between, like, the op-ed and the Harvey Weinstein experiences and what I went through as a co-op student. And by the time I write about stuff that's personal to me, I processed it about 1,000 times. Like, I don't feel, like, when people were asking me about it, they're like, was that scary for you? I'm like, no, I've talked about it for almost 15 years, so it's not a big deal. But I was not surprised by the number of people that had stories, but I was surprised by the generosity of people who were sharing. Because, I mean, people were sharing stories that, I mean, I don't think that it's fair to gauge someone's experience based on, like, levels of harassment, levels of assault, levels of abuse. But it was certainly one of those things where you see a pattern emerge and you don't see very many people immune to it. And also a lot of men came forward and shared their stories. And I think that's important. I've been trying to push that in because I did a lot of interviews about this, and I've been like, rape culture affects men too. Like, men get abused too. Men get assaulted too. Like, we need to, like, that's another stigma. So yeah, and then everyone and their mom came out. And I didn't do any TV because it made me feel weird. Kind of probably how you felt about the grief thing, where I'm like, this isn't mine. Like, other people have done, like, I asked a question. Other people shared stories. I can't be up here being like, I am now the face of this, especially because, like, the Me Too thing happened, and, like, someone else started that actually 10 years ago. Her name escapes me, but, like, there's been someone doing this forever, so.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I actually asked this on the pod last week, and I guess, sexual harassment and, abuse and power dynamics are something that have been discussed, but usually in a smaller group, and it's usually very sort of like maybe even like a more of a left cause and something that people are discussing on a smaller scale. With this Harvey thing, it's so prevalent now, and a lot of people would say long overdue, and it's super visible. Do you think this is actually going to, like, affect change going forward, and it's like put the conversation front and center for, like, everybody, and not just, those that maybe are a little more empathetic to it or have been affected directly?
I would love to be an optimist and be like, yeah, this is it. But this is centuries in the making. Like, rape culture this has been forever. This is a step out of about 10,000 steps. discourse is important, but now we need to see legislation. Now we need to see consequences. Now we need to see how are we teaching young boys and young girls about this kind of stuff? How are we talking about it amongst ourselves? How are you like it takes a long time to untrain a society. This is a step. It's very important, but it's certainly not like, well, we did it, guys. This is so far from that. It makes me, it's like, and when I actually think about how far from it we are, I get very tired.
Sure.
And I watch a lot of Great British Bake Off reruns, and I'm just like, I've seen this 1,000 times, but I can sleep. So, because it's so daunting, and I think when you think about the work it takes, because it takes a lot of work, it's going to take a lot of work, that's tough. That's tough conversations. That's like everyday kind of corrections you have to make. That's checking yourself for internalized misogyny. You have to erase the whole myth of male masculinity. You have to erase like the idea that like victims are asking for it. What did they wear? And it's prevalent. It's everywhere. It's all the time. It's like, I'm sure each of you has witnessed it and like maybe experienced it even and been like, now, oh my God, going over it. And that's trained in you and you're all in your 30s. So it's like, and you guys are like wanting to change. Think about now trying to change people who don't want to change or don't think there's a problem. We have a lot of talking to do and a lot of like conversations. But that being said, what I thought was also interesting about people sharing their stories, I was getting a lot of people from the right as well as the left. I got some Trump avatars being like, this happened to me, this happened to me. And I was like, see, it's like if we're all united under one thing, it's that we have been the victims of rape culture. What a fun, great time that is. And I always have to make a joke out of everything. Otherwise I implode. So here we are today.
So, okay, there's two things that stuck out to me when you just said. One is there needs to be a cultural shift. And I think hopefully this sort of thing changes the paradigm a little bit where people, in the same way that like smoking, I don't think it's as simple as smoking, but in the thing that just cultural attitudes have shifted over time.
Right.
And I think that is a big part of it. And then you also pointed towards like legislation, and yeah, we were texting the other day about how like you're very solution oriented, and you're just like, I just want to figure it out now. I just want to find a solution. I want to figure it out. So it's like, and I was thinking about that. It's like, how, what will it take to have a process or a pathway for victims to have a voice and to be heard that isn't a reporter running around trying desperately to get them to go on the record on something? Because it seems like that is a failure of the criminal justice system, that women, and it's complicated and there's layers, but has there been conversations about legislative action or procedure to address this?
Well, that's a good question. And also, like, you're right, because a really great piece I shared yesterday, I think maybe it was on Facebook, maybe not on Twitter, but it was how many times do victims have to be the ones to speak? Like, we know, like, me too, like, hello, yeah, me too, hi, we've been there. Are we going to, like, do something now? Are we going to change anything? And I think, there's tons of resources. Like Farah Khan is this activist in Toronto who I adore, and she does amazing work with like sexual assault outreach and support and everything. And when you look in your communities, there's always people who have always been activists, and they've always been working, and they've always been on the ground floor. And that might not be for you. Like, I'm personally not a protester. Like, I don't go to protest, but you use your gifts, right? And I wrote something about this for Rookie a long time ago, where it's like, everybody has ways of helping and inciting change. So like, now we're tired of journalists talking to victims. Cool. So now what are we going to like, how are we going to, maybe your gift is talking to your friends, and maybe that's being like, your friend says something and you're like, dude, that's not cool. And then not freaking out when your friend's like, go away, man, blah, blah, blah. And be like, no, actually, like, yada, yada, yada. Like, your gifts don't have to be big. They can just be. Like, you have to, it's toiling. It's almost like we just have to start toiling. And it's like, that's the most boring answer to that question. But it's the most, I think.
No, I think there's a real truth to that. Because at the end of the day, how do any of us make decisions? It's having people close to you ringing in your ear, something that you ought to be thinking about. And that's why it's always good to hang out with people that are better than you. Because whenever you want to do the shittier thing, you're like, I should probably put that in the recycling bin. You know what I mean? It's like,
you have a good moral compass, because I'm like, I'm the best. Everyone listens to me.
No, it's like my girlfriend's a vegetarian. It's like, I should probably not order the steak every time. Or you know what I mean? So it's like, but that's a version of toiling where it's like, you need to be, if you can do it, you should speak up and toil as much as you can with people, in every facet of your life. Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, it's just doing the work, and it sucks because you're going to be a buzzkill and you're going to feel like a buzzkill, but like, sorry,
yeah,
like, what's bigger buzzkill? Getting sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
That's a much bigger buzzkill.
Yeah.
Or like being afraid to walk to your car. I still make my friends walk me to my car, and vice versa. Like, we still text, and we're in our 30s being like, hey, like, I'm home safe. It's like how ingrained is that? Like that's insane when you think about it. Like we're grown women afraid to walk to our cars. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm always mad.
Well, and that's something that like, like my wife has that. And I think that like a lot, like I don't feel that way, so it's like
and
hard.
That's privilege.
Exactly. And that's just something that you don't even have to think about the fact you don't have to think about it. You just kind of go about your business. And so it's like, it's interesting to empathize, with somebody that would have to actually like worry about. That's a consideration in everything you do.
And that being said, I think it's also important to state that like right now, Rose McGowan I understand what she's trying to do, but she's also excluding from her narrative Black women, women of color, trans women, non-binary women. And that's the other thing. We have to understand that like I am in a position of privilege. I'm a white, straight girl. Like that's like almost a tier right under white, straight man. So it's like now I have to be like, so now we need to be mindful that it's safe for everyone. Because it's like as scared as I feel, someone feels a lot more scared. And that's and we don't talk about that because we're like women and men, da da da. And it's like, no, like it's been like feminism has failed women of color for like ever. So it's like we don't like it has such a long history of being so white and like excluding. And I mean, even the suffragettes were very, very, very exclusive. And I think like we need to have those kind of conversations, and it should make you uncomfortable because racism is uncomfortable.
You know what? Well, Me Too, which is a huge movement, like the hashtag.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to sort of what you.
Yeah, I know. I'm suing Alyssa Milano for that.
Well, here's the fascinating part. Alyssa Milano's getting all the credit, but it wasn't Alyssa Milano's thing. It was another activist that had started.
10 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
A woman of color.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on her name.
Same, but I can look. Someone can look.
We can look it up. But maybe that just speaks.
Right
we remember Alyssa Milano because she's attached to it.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And does that matter though? Too?
Yeah, I mean,
right? Because whoever has the biggest, megaphone, ultimately, like I mean, however you get there.
I think her intentions were
good. We don't look at Alyssa Milano and be like, "Well, you're doing it wrong," because I think that also, I mean, let's be cool, but like I do think it's important we need to be mindful that there's a history to everything, and a lot of our history as 4 white people, 5 we include you, sitting in this
Webmaster
room.
Dan is floating around.
Trana Burke. She started the Me Too conversation like years and years and years ago. And that like we have to be mindful when we're talking right now about like feminism and everything that like we are talking about it. We need to understand that it doesn't look the same for every person and that it hasn't been the same for every person. So that's another conversation attached to this. It's just, it is like, that's what I mean where I'm like, it's a bummer because it's like, everyone's like, we're at a turning point. I'm like,
yeah. Not so much that. Well, it's also interesting because I think we are in like such a polarizing climate right now, and people are so scared of judgment that people are scared to joke a certain way, speak a certain way, and there can be nuanced conversations about all of these things. But sometimes I feel like the way things are going, it's like it's not even worth it to maybe even have an in-depth conversation where you might not wholly agree with like the other side or certain ethics and the paradigm with certain things. So for me, it's like very interesting. Just the 3 of us, the way things have changed. Shane and I have literally been talking for 2 weeks straight about what we can joke about, what we can't joke about. Reframing sort of the things we've said in the past. And I think this is a good thing because it's shifting that way. I don't know if. I think more people are having those conversations. More men are having those conversations.
I hope they are. I mean, it's difficult. Like it's a very like, because like part of me was very hopeful when you see like men respond to all of this on Twitter, and you're like, that's nice. And then you see men respond to it, and I'm like, oh, I know you're a sexual predator. I know what you've done. I've heard about you. Like to go through your feed and be like, oh my God, like, are you serious right now?
What are you getting at? So,
like, dude,
like,
you know,
they've
personally?
done it themselves,
but they're
like,
waving the flags.
I'm so sad for these women, and you're just like, oh my God, like I have so much, like everyone knows about you. Are you serious right now? And like that, so it's almost at the point where it's like, if you want to be an ally, show us. You don't have to say it. Show us. Do it. Do the work. Call out your friends. Call out behavior when you see it. Don't see that movie by that director who likes to rape women. Like, don't do that. Like, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry if you can't see the Woody Allen movie. Like, have a cry. But like, it sucks a little bit more that like, think of the culture that like continues to like stoke the fires of. It's almost like, and I feel like I sit here and I know I sound angry, but I think anger is like the only thing I know I have left. I can't be sad. I won't do anything. Anger, at least I can be like, okay, well, fine. Like, well, then we'll do this and this and this and this. And if you have a problem with it, then get out. As opposed to like, I can't be disappointed anymore. Like, I don't have it in me. I'm just too tired.
I think one of the things that you're both getting at, and this has to do with sort of, especially people in a position of privilege, is you really have to just listen. It's like it's everyone's instinctive thing as a human, as someone who likes to talk, and it's like to either want to just debate for the sake of debating, because some people love doing that, and other people is like if they feel a little bit accused of something, to get their back up against the wall and just shoot back. But it's better just to listen, because if you can take, like, because there's, as you're saying, there's nuances in a lot of conversations, and all you can really do is bring your own life experience to it. But just as much, you have to listen to somebody else's life experience. And so it's like, that'd be another thing. It's just like, try not to, like, being defensive isn't particularly helpful, especially if you're in a position of privilege. That's what I mean. If you're in a position of privilege, it's not particularly helpful. Just listen. Just listen, and then really sit with it and try not to come up with a counter. Well, I got you here. I got you here. It's like, no, just listen.
See, that's like that's like your very lovely, accessible approach. And me as the person that gets like because you're like a dude on the internet, and I get like the other side of that, where men are like saying a lot of stuff to me. So now that,
but no one's in a bigger position of priprivilege than me.
Exactly.
So
but you're saying it in like a very nice way that I'm like, good. You're saying it like in a way that I think people will really resonate with, because I almost feel like sometimes I feel like I'm so angry that like I've run out of F's to give, like, where now I'll just be like, instead of saying it so succinctly like yourself, I'll be like, sit down and shut up and let me speak. And then like someone will be like, or you're a bitch. And I'm like, yeah, well, tell me something I do not know, and tell me something my great-grandmother did not instill in me from Belfast.
I think it's a rule of thumb. I try to keep this in mind in my daily life. It's like, if you have the sort of strength to muster up like the energy to listen, or to take the high road, or to give up your seat on the bus, or let somebody, like, because you've got enough sleep and you have food in your belly and you have enough money in your bank account, you need to do that. It is your responsibility as a fellow citizen to let the person who doesn't have it as easy an opportunity to vent and to be heard. I think that's what we need to do.
I think that's called like being a good citizen.
Yo, totally, yeah.
That's
you
like
just got to kind of like identify who's the person who's having a tougher time today, and let them have a voice.
It's very humanist and ultimately Christian, although you wouldn't.
Hey, man, there's some good stuff in that book. There's some shit stuff in that book too.
But I'm just saying.
Let's talk about religion.
Are we going to get into this?
We'll go there next.
It's like 11 p.m.
I love it.
All right, we figured it out.
I really love to bring like the anger, and like I try not to be too angry though. Like that, you're right though. That's the thing. I'm also privileged. I'm privileged. So like,
but you would take the high road I like to think, if you're listening to somebody in
my God.
that was in a slightly less, like a lower rung of privilege than you.
Or like, I'm not going to tell someone who's gone through something different, whose experiences have been different, who are like, I struggle with this, and I'm not going to be like, well, but I struggle. It's like, no. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% correct. Everyone, listen to what Max is saying. He's correct. And I am, if you want a pep talk where you think I might hit you, that's me. To come to me. That's my approach with my friends. I'm like Amy from V.
Another thing is, everybody needs to be honored, I think, for what they bring to the table and what they bring to the dinner, right? So it's like, and I really admire some of my fiery activist friends. And when you say, it's like, what is your gift that you bring? Your gift is you're a fiery motherfucker, right? Like, and that's great. Can I say that?
You can.
Okay.
I will
Father.
Well, no, don't do that.
I was trying to be gender neutral.
Oh God. Oh my God. I'm like, no, please don't connote that I'm having sex with my father.
We're going to cut that out.
You should definitely keep that in, actually.
But everybody brings something different. And so that's what you're bringing. That fiery thing is ringing in my ear, and that's a good thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And also, like, this was the thing. When I did that, when I sent that tweet, it was a question. Everyone else made it something big. So for me, what matters to me is representation for everyone that spoke up. So like, okay. So I think I've got maybe 6,000 to 7,000 replies now on that father.
The mother father.
And so it's like, okay, well, as wonderful as it is that people think what I did is cool, like, and whatever, it really just was a tweet. My priority now, as a person who posed that question, well, what am I going to do now? I'm not just going to pose the question and leave all those people. So now then I will assist in working to bring forth change. And if like anyone has a problem with that, I mean, I'm very loud and scary.
Good.
Or in the words of Sachi Cool, who once said to me when she said she wasn't fun. And I said, I have fun with you. And she's like, you're not fun. I'm like, oh, you're right. I'm not fun.
Okay, last thing.
Can we just talk for like 3 hours? Because this is fun.
Yeah,
Just
this
keep
is
moving.
great. There's probably not an answer to this question, but it's more of like a Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of observation.
Love it.
Because I had the same feeling when I saw these guys, not that necessarily guys that have committed abuse themselves, but just the reaction. It's like this big sort of public post about I'm gonna do better, and the cynical part of me goes, like you're just self-serving and like trying to be this guy that like, and that kind of is obnoxious or
That's
eye rolling
how I
to me.
feel.
Okay, so what is there? Okay, so we already know what to do, and that's sort of like to jostle and to assert yourself when you're amongst your friends. Is it necessary, or should we be posting something on the mic on Much saying we stand with women?
Please stop doing that. You didn't do that, which I love
no,
you
we
for
didn't.
all. Like, thank you, amen, baby Jesus, Christian, whatever. You guys did, I thought, a very good job because you retweeted me, which is very nice, but you like have always been quite generous in sharing other people's words, because I feel like if someone can say it better and has said it better, just retweet what they said.
That's a good idea. That's a good rule of thumb for the internet.
Yeah. Like, why would I hate when somebody like does like just elevate other voices. Like, you have the platform. That could be your gift. You have more gifts. Everyone has
that's
gifts.
one of the gifts. That's actually a great piece of advice.
I am
just
great
like
at
elevate
giving
other
advice.
people who are playing a more substantial role and will say it better than you anyway.
Right? Like, why would I start like talking about like a trans person's experience? How dare I? Like, why wouldn't I? Will
Sure.
just share an activist's work. Like, who am I to do that?
That sits 1,000 times better with me. That's a great idea. That's a good lesson for us all.
It is.
Yeah.
This feels
Because
like-
I just get so it's so eye rolly when you see some guy like, you clearly spent fucking 3 hours just like trying to craft this fucking
It's like literally, I can't do
Winston Churchill monologue. It's like, get the out of here.
I
man.
like sat at my computer just doing like a hand job motion in the air at the laptop, reading through people's things, being like, I know about you. I know, no, you're definitely the worst. And like, just like unfollow. It's fine. It's like, it is what it is.
What are your thoughts on people? Because a lot of people with Me Too are sharing their experiences, but then they don't name names.
Yeah.
And there's sort of been this polarizing thing where people are like, well, say the name if you're going to come out and say it. And obviously, it's everybody's personal decision.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think sharing is your personal decision, because also, like, I'm not going to force someone to cope in a way that isn't helpful to them. I don't know what, like, it's not going to, I mean, the guy who harassed me at the radio station used a fake name at the radio station. I don't even know what his real name is. How insane is that?
Wow.
Like, so I couldn't out him if I tried. But I mean, some people cope by not sharing. And I tried to make that very clear. I'm like, if you don't feel comfortable sharing,
I read that, yeah.
please don't feel like you have to, because everybody's mental health is very different. Everybody's experiences are very different. Everybody is the product and the sum of their parts and their histories. And if you have coped best by telling maybe a close friend or keeping it to yourself, but knowing that you have dealt with it, then by all means, do not cross a threshold you don't feel comfortable with. I think that's grossly unfair that we are making survivors feel like they're the ones that have to do the work. They've already done the work. They're here. And the ones that aren't, that's even more tragic. So it's like, like, that's the thing. It's like, how many times do we need to do this every week now? Like, I mean, I have stories to start when I'm like 10. Like, we can start there. Like, I mean, I have no feelings about them. I can I can do that every week, but I'm tired of doing that every week.
Yeah.
I would like to see something come from this now. So you toil.
Okay, well, we're going to get to our guest this week, who is a very successful person.
Who?
A woman. Michelle MacLaren, who is a
Oh.
big-time Canadian director. She's most recently executive produced and directed The Deuce, which is out. She did the first episode and the finale, which we talk about. She directed episodes of The X-Files, episodes of Game of Thrones. She's from the West Coast. We talk a lot about her upbringing. We talk a lot about how she broke into the industry, starting as a production assistant, working in wardrobe, doing everything she could to sort of make her way up, working commercials, and then finally get her shot directing an episode of The X-Files back in the day. And now she's killing it. So she was here to talk about that show, The Deuce, which is David Simon's show. Are you a huge Wire fan, Maxie?
You know, it's one of those things where I've never actually watched The Wire.
Oh, me
Neither
either.
have I. I haven't either.
But people kill me on
Whenever
this.
anybody goes to The Wire, I'm like, yeah, I love The Wire.
That's why I thought that.
I've been lying. I've watched 2
liars.
episodes,
Yeah,
and I'm just
3
like,
for me.
yeah, Bubbles, man, like crazy guy. And
You
they're like,
convinced me, and so I felt the guilt of never watching it or
Guys,
finding the time.
what
Yeah,
if we
Baltimore, it's
watched
so
it-
gritty.
What if we watched it? Like, not maybe together. I know our schedules are crazy, but if we started watching it all independently and then like
Had a group chat
Had a
about it and then
group
talked
chat.
about it on the pod.
Would that be cool?
That could be cool.
Okay.
Shane's like, I hate this
I've
girl.
seen The Wire, yeah.
Okay.
The one guy's not saying anything. He's like, yeah, I saw it, you
I'm good.
posers.
Yeah, I'm
It's
busy.
an awesome show.
Can we do this?
I'm down.
Because last time I tried to start it, I had the worst flu of life, and so it just reminds me of like having a fever. So I think though, if I'm like forced to do this,
It's like book club, but for
Book club,
TV, yeah.
Wire club,
Wire Club.
I can do this. I am up for. If we say it now, I'm being held accountable. That's why I always write about alcoholism and stuff because I can't jump off the wagon if I'm like held accountable. So now here I am, held accountable.
Okay, let's do it.
We're
Let's
doing
do
it.
All right. Do you want to get to Michelle MacLaren?
Let's get to Michelle MacLaren and let's start watching The Wire. Let's do it.
Yes.
We had Edgar Wright on.
Oh, wow.
Great
Oh,
director.
I love him. He's awesome.
Yeah. But how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. You've been doing a lot of press.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Which
do
is
you-
fun.
Do you like doing this sort of whole press thing?
I love talking about a show I love making. So
Yeah.
I can never talk enough about the Deuce.
The stuff you like, it's easy to do the press.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you ever had to go out and do press for something that you weren't so proud of?
No, I haven't, thankfully. But it's rare. I shouldn't say it's rare, but when you're directing, you're often on location, so we don't always get to do all the press junkets because we're not available.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that I'm available to do this with the Deuce because I love it so much.
Yeah, well, I love it too. I've seen the first 4 episodes.
Oh, good.
They gave me the 8, and I was
Right.
super excited, and then I got caught up, and I cannot wait to get back to it.
Oh,
And
good. Oh,
we're-
that's a good sign.
We're going to talk about it in a bit, though.
Okay.
But first, I kind of want to go back because I think with listeners of our pod, we like to get into sort of the minutia of how creatives do their work, and then also the path that some people take to
Sure.
get there. So, I mean, like you grew up in Vancouver.
I did, yes.
What did your parents do when you were growing up, and was like entertainment very prevalent in your home?
What was prevalent is that on the weekend, we'd all jump into my dad's big, huge old Oldsmobile, and we'd go to the multiplex, and we could go to any movie we wanted, and we'd meet up afterwards and we'd talk about the movies. And I have 3 siblings, and 3 out of 4 of us went into the movie business. My parents are not in the movie business. My mom is a writer, but she's wrote nonfiction books and articles and things, and she's amazing. And my dad is a businessman. So, but movies and storytelling is always part of my upbringing. And we had a summer cottage on an island that has no electricity. It's very rustic. So we would spend our summers there, and we would tell stories and play charades, and that was our entertainment because we didn't have television. And it was really good. And I think that from a very young age, I always loved storytelling. And I would take pictures, and my parents would always say, "Oh, Michelle, you've got a good eye." And I'd think, what are you talking about? That's just the picture. It's the same picture anybody else would take. But they very much encouraged me in that direction. And I knew from a young age that I wanted to be in the movie business, and that someday I wanted to be a director.
That's fascinating. So it was really sort of like, even maybe not intentionally, they're cultivating your creativity because you're going to this place. You guys are being creative. Your dad's bringing you to the Cineplex every weekend. Would you and your siblings always go to different movies, or would you?
Sometimes we go to the same movies, and sometimes we go to different movies. And we'd always hang around afterwards and discuss them. My brother is incredibly creative. He's an agent. He's the head of feature literary for ICM, and he's one of my agents. And he's very helpful and instrumental in what I do. There's many occasions where I've called him up at 11 o'clock at night and said, "I'm bringing a scene over to your house. Something's not working. I want you guys to take a look at it."
Right.
And he and his wife would sit down and go, "Well, and give me thoughts and ideas." And he'd do the same with scripts. And it's really very, very collaborative. My younger sister, she was a production coordinator, and she's a mother of 4 now, and builds and designs houses. I mean, she's super creative, and my oldest sister's a veterinarian ophthalmologist who would say she's very scientific and not creative, but she is. So we love to sit around and talk, as a lot of people do nowadays, talk about movies
Sure.
and TV shows and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As my parents do too. They love it.
Was there like a film or a TV show in particular that sort of sparked your thing? I mean, it seems like in general you just loved it all, but was there anything that you would say, oh, that was mine?
Okay, well, it's a funny question because I worked my way up from a production assistant to producing before I became a director. And I was a producer on The X-Files. I came very late into the series. It was season 7. And for years, I had been studying directing on the side, studying acting because I knew someday I wanted to direct. And my grandmother passed away, and my mom found a letter in her stuff, and she sent it to me. And she said, Michelle, you've got to read this right away. And it was a letter I'd written to my grandmother telling her what I was up to. And I had said in this letter that I just saw this movie that it was so great, and I hope someday I can make a movie like that. And I did not put the name of the movie in the letter, but I dated it, and I was 13 years old. And I thought, wow, I've wanted to be a director since I was 13. I better go ask the producers if I can direct. And I was very fortunate that I went to the producers, and I've been training for this for a long time, and I asked them if I could direct, and they said yes. And the first episode I directed was written by a man named Vince Gilligan.
Yeah.
And the first thing Vince directed, I produced because it was on the X-Files. But I did go back to and looked at the movies that came out when I was 13, and I don't know what movie I was talking about. And the only thing I can think is, because the letter is to my grandmother, it must have been X-rated or something, so I didn't put the title in it. I don't know. So I can't say that there's anyone in particular, but there's certain filmmakers that have been a huge influence on me. I love Sergio Leone movies. I really love Once Upon a Time in the West. That's a huge influence. I love Martin Scorsese movies, and David Cronenberg was a great Canadian director. Norman Jewison's another great Canadian director. There's a lot of wonderful filmmakers who I've studied, and so many more than I'm mentioning. Billy Friedkin. I mean, it's endless, and I feel really fortunate that you're able to study their work and then be able to be inspired by it and use it in my own work.
Of course. It's fascinating you mentioned that, you started out PAing and then producing and working your way up. And you said it was only after you sort of read this letter, you're like, oh, I've wanted to be a director. Maybe I should go into that. So from the start, was there like sort of a keen ambition to move up, or were you just like, I'm happy to be here? And how do you get that first gig? Not the directing, but into the industry.
Right, yeah, no, all good questions. So I went to Queen's, and I majored in film. And when I graduated, I traveled for a bit, and then I wanted to get a job in the movie business, but I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I went and I got a list of all the film companies and commercial house companies in Vancouver. And my dad, who's a businessman, he has nothing to do with the movie business, skied with one of the guys, Scott Kennedy, who had a commercial house at the time. And so he said, look, why don't you take your resume to Scott and see if he can give you some advice. So my resume consisted of waitressing and basically waitressing and waitressing. Yeah. So I did up my resume, and I had my little brown envelope with my resume in it, and I was on my way to go see Scott Kennedy, and the elevator doors opened, and there was a guy standing there with a walkie-talkie, and he looked at the envelope in my hand, and he goes, do you want to be in the movie business? And I said, yes. And he goes, we're shooting 2 blocks away, and we're understaffed. Drop your resume off and come and volunteer. I said, okay. So I dropped my resume off, said hi to Scott, went down 2 blocks, volunteered, which was for Scott's company. And I worked that day for free, and I worked for that company for 2 years. That was the only day I worked for free. And I was very, very fortunate, but and that makes it sound like it was really easy. It wasn't easy. What I realized very quickly is you have to be willing to work really hard and do anything that is needed, and really have your eyes open to what is needed. Where's there a void, and where can I fill it? And I was holding a stop sign in the pouring rain for 14 hours straight. I was sweeping up cigarette butts and pouring coffee. I didn't care what I did. I just wanted to be on a film set. And I learned so much I'm always learning on a film set, but in those 2 years with Scott's company, I was a PA. I worked in locations. I was an AD. I ended up unit managing. I would work in every single department that would allow me and just fill whatever void was needed. And this was in commercials. So commercials, they're very short and they're quick. And so there was a great variety. I was really fortunate with that. And then there was an AD I worked with, and he said, Michelle, will you come and be a second AD on a movie I'm doing, a really low budget movie? And I said, well, I've never done that before. And he goes, don't worry, I'll teach you how to do it. And I was doing that movie, and let's just say there was some voids in other areas of the movie, and
like in other departments,
perhaps the production managing department, and and so I just helped fill that in because I had some unit managing experience with the commercials. And the producers said to me on the next movie that they were doing, again, very low budget, this is years ago, they said, will you production manage it? And I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, what do those titles mean? It's just like, okay.
I'm thinking, I said, oh, where are you shooting it? And they said, well, it's a Western, and we're shooting it on this ranch outside of Calgary. And I thought, okay, great. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe if I mess it up, nobody's going to know. So I said yes. But it's been. I'm making it sound like I had a lot of luck, which I've had. I've had a lot of luck, and it takes a lot of luck, but it also takes a lot of really hard work and dedication, and being willing to do whatever job is presented to you. And then you get to a point where you start thinking about, okay, I've exposed myself to all these different parts of the business. What is it I want to focus on? What is it that I want to do? And I realized that I really wanted to direct. I wanted to be part of the storytelling process and be very creatively involved. And I wish I was a writer as well. I have written. I'm a member of the WGA, but I don't have the discipline to write. It's very hard for me to sit down and write, and I'm so fortunate to work with such brilliant writers. I have the discipline to sit down and shot list for 12 hours straight.
Yeah.
Why I can do one and not the other, I don't know. But so that's what I ended up focusing on.
So when you're directing, I mean, you get, I guess what you're saying sort of is like, everyone needs breaks, but once you get those breaks, it's about hard work and building relationships, and those can lead to other opportunities. So when you get that opportunity to direct that episode of the X-Files that Vince wrote,
right?
What's going through your mind?
What is going through my mind is absolute, utter fear. Terrified. I was absolutely terrified. This is an immense responsibility. And I had been preparing for it for a long time. I'd been producing for about 10 years. And I had been studying acting for about 3 years to understand what actors go through. I've been taking directing classes on the side. And when I knew that I was going to get this opportunity in our last season, I actually, in our hiatus, went to the Rockport Film School in Maine, and which a bunch of my friends had done who are second unit directors. It's an intensive week-long program, because what really scared me was, do I know how to break down a scene, shoot all the pieces and put it back together and have it make sense? And that week was taught by Alan Meyerson, who's a great television director. And I told Alan the opportunity I had, and he really helped me focus on that. And then the best piece of advice that somebody gave me going in to shoot that for the first time was, one of the producers said, always make sure the camera's telling the story. And I thought, oh my God, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I really spent a lot of time in trying to understand and learn what that means, and always making sure the camera's telling the story. Because as the director, as one of the people, because you're collaborating with your cinematographer who is deciding where you're going to put the camera, what the lenses you're going to use, that is manipulating. And manipulating is I don't love using that word, but that you are directing the point of view of the story that you are telling. And you always want your camera to be telling the story and evoking the emotion that you want to do in that particular moment. And so those are choices that you are making, not only when you're shooting, but also in the editing room as well.
Well, functionally, I mean, like, I guess, how do you ensure everyone from, the showrunner, the writers, the actors, and of course yourself, like, all have a cohesive vision going in? Is it a matter of trust, or is it sort of everything being discussed right down to maybe the inflection of a word of dialogue?
It depends on the situation. If we take the Deuce, for example,
yes.
David and George and I had a lot of discussions at the beginning. It was important to all of us that this is very authentic, raw, grounded. It's there's nothing gratuitous. There's nothing titillating when it's not supposed to be. It's that we wanted to do an honest, real portrayal of this world. And now we are building a world, and we're building a world that existed in 1971. So we're recreating a world. So we did a ton of research, and I put together a visual lookbook for how I saw the show. And of course, I showed it to these guys, and I talked to David and George and Nina about the details of this. And then talked to our production designer, Beth Mickle, who also brought images to this look, and to Pepe, our cinematographer, and Anna Terraza, our costume designer. And we all contributed to this look, and it evolved into what the style and the tone of the show was going to be. So we knew what every prop, every piece of wardrobe, every location was part of this look that we were putting together, this tone, this style. And going into it, we had a very strong visual representation of what we wanted the show to be. When you're shooting, everything changes.
Right, yeah.
You know, there's never enough time and money, and things pop up that are unexpected. We showed up on 30th in downtown Manhattan one night, and it's supposed to be 1971, and earlier in the day there'd been a gas leak, and the streets full of 2015 gas trucks, and you're like, oh my God, you know, and so we have to rethink, and you know, how are we going to do this? And we had what we called blocking trucks. We had these big trucks from 1971 that we would use in these kind of emergencies
to hide modern looking things.
Exactly.
Sure.
But we had to change our angles. We had to rewire some of the lights. We had to use a little CG. So it was a combination of things. And when I got to the editing room and I was sat down to watch the first cut, I thought, wow, I wonder, in all this craziness, were we able to pull this off? You know, does it still look like our lookbook? And I watched the cut, and I pulled out the lookbook, and I thought, yeah, we were. I mean, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we had the feeling and the tone and the look that we wanted, the details, the authenticity. And that's the collaboration with an amazing production designer, Beth Mickle, and her team, and an amazing cinematographer, Pepe, and Anna Terraza, our costume designer, and the cast were just so bold and brave, and they went for it. And it's an incredible collaboration that all starts with a brilliant script. You know, David Simon, George Pelconis, and wonderful supportive producers like Nina Noble. That's, you know, when all that comes together, that's magic.
Are you able to, because you directed the first episode and then the finale, is it easy to walk away and then come back at the finale and still feel like you're in the groove and in the swing? And
It's I mean, obviously I had watched all the episodes, and they were wonderful in keeping me involved in what's happening and the process and everything. So I came into the finale educated, obviously, knowing everything that had happened since I had done the pilot. It was really exciting to shoot the pilot, go away and come back, and we actually mixed the pilot and the finale back to back. And I remember David and we finished mixing the pilot, and the next day we went in to mix the finale, and we thought, okay, well, here we're going to see if this worked. You know,
it's a bit of alchemy.
Yeah, but there were so many wonderful directors and producers and writers involved that you know, they didn't need me in the middle. Sure. But one of the reasons that directors are often executive producers on pilots is that as a producer, you are much more involved in every step of the process, and most producers want the pilot director to be involved all the way through. And I'm talking about all the post process. Yep. And these guys were wonderful collaborators. So I was involved in both the pilot and the finale and in every step of the process, and that was great.
Very cool. Well, lastly, as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask, is there a dream project or story out there, you know, that, say there was no limitations, that you have always wanted to make?
Okay, well, that's a dream, being able to make something that has no limitations.
That in and of itself. That's the story. Yeah.
There's a lot of projects that I would love to do. I have a company that has a lot of both television and feature projects in development. Vince Gilligan and I are adapting a book, The Raven, the Untold Story of the Reverend Jim Jones, and we're doing a mini-series with HBO on that. Vince is writing it, I'm directing it. I'm super excited.
Very cool.
About that. Very cool. I'm developing a project at TriStar called The Nightingale. It's a feature adaptation of Kristen Hanna's book, The Nightingale, which I'm very excited about. And I have a project that's a development from a book called Snatched, which we're going to change the title because that movie that came out recently. And I have a number of original ideas, both TV and feature, that are in development. I love being part of things that are from the ground up. I love television. I would love to do more pilots. And so there's a lot of worlds I would like to explore, but I really like what you said. Is there something that I would like without limitations? Mm-hmm. Yes, everything without limitations.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to talk to you.
Welcome to The Dessert. We are joined, or he's still here in the studio, our friend and pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Shane, what is going on?
Hey, so I wanted to talk about the new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Me too.
But I was talking to my friend Mark Myers on the phone recently, and he brought up something very interesting that I'd like to address. He was talking about the Harvey Weinstein episode from last week, and he wanted to know why I kind of just literally said nothing during that entire discussion, because Mark's like, oh, it'd be interesting to hear your unique perspective on all this. So I told Mark that I, in fact, did talk about it, but everything I said was edited out, and there was a reason behind it. And the reason is, when I chimed in to talk about Harvey, instead of actually talking about Harvey, I tried to focus on the next big salacious Hollywood scandal that I thought would surface. Or in this case, I guess resurface, because I was talking about the 2014 case with X-Men director Bryan Singer, where someone accused him of drugging and raping a 15-year-old boy. And there was also a story in that same article where he was accused of filming nude underage boys during the filming of his other film he directed called Apt Pupil.
Yeah, he wanted the actors to appear nude in the showers, but they were underage.
And it was unnecessary to the movie. It didn't serve any purpose. So that was an article I think it would be good if we shined a light on, I thought, at the time. When we listened to the playback of that tape, it seemed like I brought it up a little too cavalier, and it was almost as if I cared more about either breaking the story or being the one to predict what the next big story to break would be. The other reason was we weren't sure if I got all the facts right on the case. And the last thing we wanted to be was irresponsible media. So I discussed with you, Mike, I'm looking at.
Yep.
And we decided that I would talk about it on this dessert after I did maybe a little bit more research and could talk about maybe in a more serious manner.
Sure.
So here we are today. The problem is, when I was Googling it and researching, I found that the man who accused Bryan Singer, his name's Michael Egan, he was actually sentenced to 2 years for investment fraud. And his own lawyer, who was representing him in the Bryan Singer case, said that the sexual allegations against Bryan were false claims. So that kind of reframed the way I thought about this person, and maybe this is an incorrect way to feel, but I thought maybe this person's character wasn't that good to be basically, I didn't want a witch hunt going against Bryan Singer unnecessarily if the person I didn't believe.
Sure, if the accuser was not very credible.
Yeah, and I'm also told that I can't say the word witch hunt. My wife told me that that's an incorrect term too, but I don't know a better way to frame it, so hopefully everyone out there knows what I mean.
You do not have anything against witches? They are allowed to practice?
I like witches, okay? And that's what I want mainly to be the takeaway from today. But anyway, Anne was here up the top. I
Yep.
sat in for that. I remained, again, largely silent for that. Afterwards, I asked Anne, because I had a question running through my mind, which is everyone who's accused, are they guilty, or should society view them as guilty? And is everyone who's exonerated, should society view them as innocent? And that's something I was struggling with, whether to even bring this up right now.
Yeah.
And Anne's told me that in cases of sexual assault, typically where there's smoke, there's fire, and that in the facts that are presented in this case, she would have no problem never seeing another Bryan Singer film again in her life. Although I'm not as black and white as Anne in my views, typically I think the right answer is somewhere in the middle. In this case, I think that it is warranted given, I am pop culture. Recently, I did just hear my son or daughter to be's beating heart.
Wow.
And I wouldn't trust Bryan Singer to babysit the kid. And that's kind of the viewpoint I'm going to go forward with in how I choose to associate with people. And so people might know what I'm talking about. But that's what I had to talk about right now.
Sure.
And, how about that crazy Larry David? You know?
Well, no, I mean, like, listen, I think you're asking tough questions. You know what I mean? Because right now, focus and rhetoric is at an all-time high. And I think that, like, even to step back and ask, you know, a difficult question like, are all people that are accused guilty or all people that are exonerated innocent, is like even a conversation maybe people don't even want to have right now, you know? But it is a thoughtful question. And I think Anne had a thoughtful response. And this should be a place where we talk about those things, you know? And I think that, like, I'm glad that you had this forum to say something, because if people feel like, you know, you didn't get to say your piece or your thoughts weren't completely sort of known or on the record, I think this is a good place for this. Max, any thoughts?
No, I'm still processing it all. Because it's an interesting question, because I think, well, you know, when there's these allegations of sexual assault, I think the instinct to believe the victims, as Anne said, I think is the starting point. Where it gets cloudy sometimes is you know, the Rolling Stone UVA piece, you know, where it's like, oh, there's or it sounds like in this Bryan Singer story where
Or you watch a film like Making a Murderer, and all of a sudden you're incensed at a false conviction, and then all of a sudden that story turns out new things evolve in that case where all of a sudden you do believe the conviction.
Totally.
So it's constantly a moving narrative.
That all said,
you know what that does too, though? It speaks to the power of journalism. And, you know, a great writer that frames things in the right way or a compelling way can make you think anything. So it's always sort of like who's the messenger, right? How are these stories getting to us? How are they researched? Which angle are they taking? Is, you know, journalism not biased? I don't know, like, the answer to those things, but like you said, something as compelling as Making a Murderer can make you think one thing, but if it's edited and the music is different in a different way, it's completely different.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, though, bringing it back to the first thing I said about what Anne's advice was, is I think it's really important to be good listeners, to also understand the reality, though, even though there are these glaring examples, you know, any victim of sexual assault doesn't want to coming forward is one of the hardest things ever. So just always sort of keeping that in the back of your mind, or in the front of your mind, I should say, is that the reality is that most victims don't even get hurt to begin with. So as a starting place, I think that's a really, you know, yeah.
But one thing that runs through my mind is incentive, right? In most cases, why would anyone falsely accuse anyone? Unless maybe they had some financial incentive in mind, which with famous people, you know, sometimes that might happen. And Anne's advice was, in most cases, that's not actually true. It's when there's smoke, there's fire, and these people in power with money are using their incentive, which is that they feel like they're more likely to get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So next item up for dessert is I want to talk about is the head coverage issue in Quebec. Go.
Head coverage?
You know,
I have no idea.
I totally missed it.
You know the head covering with the beer
rack? The hijabs. Or
but they're not called hijabs. What are they called?
It took me a month to research this. Like, I can't throw me a new topic.
That's it. That's all. That's our episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much to Anne T. Donahue. Again, follow her on Twitter at Anne T. Donahue. And you can follow the pod, Mike on Much, on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe in iTunes. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you said or what you think. The artwork is provided by Jenna Gregory at jennasdoodles.com. Tara Paquette puts it all together. Huge thanks to Webmaster Dan, everybody here at Bell Media for supporting the show.
The Mike on Much podcast is produced by Max Kerman. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. See you next week if we don't die on the weekend.